President Obama says lawmakers have made a mistake after US Congress overwhelmingly voted to let families of 9/11 victims sue the government of Saudi Arabia. Both the Senate and the House chose to override Obama's veto. He'd argued that the veto would undermine US-Saudi relations to create tit-for-tat lawsuits against US service members in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. It's the first veto override over Obama's 8-year presidency. Well, we can speak to Peter Mathews live in Los Angeles, who is a professor of political science. Welcome to the program. 9/11 saw a seismic shift in America's policy in fighting terrorism. Is it any surprise that this bill has been vetoed?
No surprise. Matter of fact, 4 months ago, I predicted that the veto would be overridden, and it was by much more than 2/3 of a majority, which was needed in both houses. And there was no surprise because the legislators are concerned the elections are coming up and they don't want to seem to go against the 9/11 victims' families. At the same time, they didn't really want to alienate Saudi Arabia, one of our allies, either. So they held a vote pretty much the override vote was held publicly, but the original vote on the bill was held as unanimous vote, a voice vote. So you couldn't really tell who voted for or against the bill originally. But this time in the override, it was a regular vote. 348 to 77 in the House and 97 to 1 in the Senate. So the override was sustained of the veto.
If we look at the legal issues here, what chances do the families have of trying to get success?
Well, certainly, because the notion of sovereign immunity, which was actually being changed now or modified by this bill, is the notion that says that no country's government can be sued in another country's court by citizens of the other country for any reason whatsoever. And in this case, the exception was made to allow the residents of the United States who were here to sue the Saudi government for damages for what happened to their relatives when they were killed or injured. And yet the 9/11 Commission report back in 2004 investigated and found that the Saudi government was not involved, neither was Saudi nationals, the Saudi officials. And so it becomes a real problem with US-Saudi relations now, because Saudi Arabia is actually threatened to sell off American investment. Their bonds that the Saudis hold, about $750 billion worth of US bonds and assets, they're threatening to sell it off, which can actually lower the value in the fiscal policy of the US. So that's a real problem right now. Not to mention the fact in the Middle East, we need cooperation with Saudi Arabia to help bring peace in the Middle East. You know, you have a situation in Syria that's so out of control right now, and this just roils the waters, unfortunately. But again, the senators and Congress members couldn't dare vote against their constituents, or so they felt, before the November election.
But are these constituents being sold a lie in the sense that there's unlikely to be a chance of them ever getting a lawsuit off the ground if Saudi Arabia has been found already not guilty of any misdemeanors?
Yes, it's going to be very difficult for them to prove that Saudi Arabia was involved with it and owes them compensation because of the earlier ruling by 2 courts. One court said early on that Saudi Arabia could not even be sued because the action of the terrorism occurred outside the U.S. That's back in 2005. 2015, a U.S. court ruled that the victims could sue Saudi Arabia. So the chances that a court case will go through and the victims will actually win compensation probably are much lower than what they think. And so, yes, you may say that some of these victims have not been told the full picture, and it's a difficult situation, a very emotional issue. It's an issue which goes right to the heart of American feelings of patriotism and of victimism from the attacks. At the same time, you've got to have level heads prevail and look at international law. And what this does, it opens up a can of worms, because if the U.S. Citizens can sue the Saudi government, that means that other citizens in other parts of the world who have been victims, their relatives have been victims of drone strikes, American drone strikes, could sue the U.S. government, endangers the United States officials, all the way from diplomats in the United States all the way to U.S. government officials. They can be sued also. So it's a big can of worms, believe me. So let's see how things go here, and it's a very precarious situation right now, in the conditions and the relationship.
Okay, Peter Mathews live in Los Angeles. Thanks very much.